Millicent Trey Middleton. And it's 5:05 now, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. At this point, if you don't have your wine glasses already filled up, please take this moment to go get your wine. Joe, do you have your glass of wine?
I did not come prepared with my glass of wine. I forgot. I have my
And
water.
okay, hey, any refreshment will do. We just want this to be a relaxing moment for everybody, and we want people to just wind down from a long day's work and just get in tune with this great subject. Now, I am running for State House a representative seat 116. And as a part of my platform, I have chosen to take on legislation of medical marijuana. Due to the fact that this is such a broad topic, we are going to get started right away. Normally, we will relax, play some music, but we only have 1 hour to do this. And I want to be able to hear from our guests who will really dive into the subject. Now, we want as much time as possible for everyone to ask some questions to our guests and get their opinions. But first of all, let me say that I'm not a doctor or a scientist. I am a lay person observing what is going on in our country with prescription drugs, how it has affected our children and adults alike, how overdosing and death have grown to epidemic proportions. The CDC reported in 2019 that an estimated 69,029 people died of drug overdose in a year's period. Nearly 7 out of 10 of these overdose deaths were due to opioids. Now, medical marijuana is legal in 33 U.S. states and the District of Columbia. States allow restricted use of medical marijuana includes Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, y'all, Missouri, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. This is just restricted use. And you will find out from Jill when we bring her on how restricted this could be. Now, according to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, better known as the DEA, marijuana is considered a Scheduled 1 illegal drug under the Title 21 United States Code Controlled Substance Act. That means a person may not use, possess, manufacture, or distribute the drug, even for medical reasons. This is how they get us nationally on it. However, there are a few subjects that can stir up strong emotions among doctors, scientists, researchers, policymakers, and the public. That medical marijuana. Is it safe? Should it be legal? Discriminalized? Has its effectiveness been proven? What condition it is useful for? And is it addictive? How do we keep it out of the hands of teenagers? Is it really the wonder drug that people claim it is? Is medical marijuana just a ploy to legalize marijuana in general? Now, I can tell you right now, the expectation for today and any of the webcasts is to share with viewers some of the issues that challenge our communities. This is one of them. And to share information, knowledge, and possible resolution. We hope to have special guests each week who have labored in these areas and can impart information and knowledge. And today, we have two special guests in this category. One, Jill Swain, a dear friend of mine that I've learned to love very dearly, and Richard Ray, who I hope is on the line by now. But lastly, it gives our viewers a chance to ask questions and make short comments. After all, we're an hour webcast. So With that being said, welcome aboard, Jill. How are you?
Hi, Millicent. I'm great, thank you. And thank you so much for including me and giving me the opportunity to share some information and insight with those who are participating in this Zoom meeting. You know, I appreciate you taking this on as a topic for your campaign because it is a very important issue that affects thousands of South Carolinians who would like to have access to medical cannabis, but yet here we are, you know, one of the few states in our country who still has not legalized cannabis for medicinal purposes. So I really appreciate you taking on this issue and having me here tonight.
Great. Um, so if South Carolina allows restricted, and this is for you, Jill. So if South Carolina allows restricted use of medical marijuana, why do you have to go to North Carolina or wherever you go to have your daughter treated?
Okay, so there are different components of the cannabis plant. There's actually hovering around 100 different cannabinoids, and then there are other compounds that are into the hundreds. So the cannabis plant itself is a very complex plant. And what we did in 2014, just to give you a little bit of background, my daughter has severe intractable epilepsy and cerebral palsy. So her seizures are very high frequency. She would typically have 800 to 1,000 seizures a day. And the pharmaceutical drugs just were not providing her relief. And the doctors would stack one drug onto another, and she was highly sedated, or she developed tics, she was drooling, she lost her ability to speak. There are all sorts of very devastating side effects that we saw from the pharmaceutical drugs. And her neurologists reached a point where they just didn't have any answers or any other medications that they felt could potentially be of benefit. We also took her to specialists up and down the East Coast. We put her on a special diet, the ketogenic diet, which a lot of people are using now for weight loss, can sometimes have therapeutic benefits for patients with epilepsy. For her, it wasn't successful. And in 2013, we first learned about a component of the cannabis plant called cannabidiol, or CBD. And so my mother-in-law happened to live in Beaufort, where Senator Tom Davis lives, and they had a mutual friend, and she was telling this friend about her granddaughter, my daughter. And he said, well, gosh, you know, if that's something they're legalizing in other states, you know, my friend or my law partner, I'm not sure what the affiliation was, is a state senator. Maybe y'all should meet and talk about it. So they met, and we met, and you know, explained the benefits of CBD and that it's non-psychoactive. And so a bill was introduced in early 2014 that would legalize the possession of CBD, cannabidiol, for patients in South Carolina who had intractable epilepsy and had a doctor's certified letter stating that they did have that condition and that the CBD oil might be of benefit. Well, that bill surprisingly passed the same year it was introduced, which any of you who know anything about state legislature, very few things pass in 1 year. I've now learned that. But the problem was it was a possession only bill, and it didn't provide any sort of resource. Now, this is back in 2014 when the federal farm bill had just been passed to allow for the cultivation of hemp for research purposes. So states were just beginning to pass hemp laws, and hemp is a form of cannabis that is very, very low in THC and quite often high in CBD. So a lot of farmers started growing hemp in order to harvest this CBD. But it took a while for those laws to be passed and those programs to be enacted. And then there was questions about the commerciality of it. You know, could you, okay, you can grow it for research, but can you actually produce a product and sell it? And so basically what the bill did is it allowed us to possess it, but didn't provide a resource. So it put all of us moms with sick children on the black market to get medication for our children that our state legislators told us we could have.
Right.
And so, and they just said, oh, well, we're not saying how they get it. We're just saying once they've got it in South Carolina, they can have it. Well, they didn't realize what they created was a huge problem. And we were on the black market and we were sold things that we didn't even know if they were fit for human consumption, let alone whether or not they were going to have any sort of medicinal benefit.
So tell me, what is it considered restricted use?
So that what I'm saying is that's what's legal now. But essentially, that CBD bill has kind of become moot, more or less, because we're all using hemp CBD now, right? So that's what I'm saying. The farmers, originally CBD was derived from the marijuana plant, okay? It was extracted and that was a cannabinoid that was sort of pulled out of the plant. But once hemp was legalized and the farmers realized that they could grow high CBD hemp, which was legal, then that's what everyone started growing and selling the hemp-derived CBD. So
Gotcha.
when you say limited use, I think there's only two or three states in the entire country that don't have legal hemp laws. So basically CBD is essentially, now CBD gets a little bit complicated because some states have required that the CBD be manufactured and sold under their medical cannabis program and not under their hemp program. So it's even a little more complex than all of that, but we're not there. Here in South Carolina, it's legal under hemp. So now anyone in the state can actually use use CBD. I mean, they sell it in gas stations. I don't know if you see the signs, along the highway or whatever. But I mean, anyone now can use CBD. So it's not just for patients with epilepsy. So we're very fortunate that that has opened up because of the hemp program.
Okay, so we have a question. I want to be able to get one question in right quick.
Absolutely.
William Hamilton has a question. Christian, William, you are unmuted. Can you go ahead?
Actually, I'm sorry, I didn't have a question. I was just checking the system to make sure everything was working, but it's been very interesting thus far. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, let me go ahead and ask this question, Jill. And I know this might be personal, but can we talk about your daughter's health issue before and after being treated with the medical marijuana substance?
Absolutely. So we first started using CBD, and like I said, we didn't even know what we were getting. So the success was, we had highs and lows because sometimes we might have a good product and then that source would dry up, the person would disappear. I mean, because they were shipping it to us illegally. I mean, it's drug trafficking.
Right.
Or we would, find another parent who knew somebody who had access. And it was just this constant scramble to try to get this medication for our children. We joined this network of parents across the country who were like us. There were 14 states within a couple of years that passed these similar types of laws for CBD. So the results were mixed. And, but I did see some success. I mean, she was more alert, she was more verbal, so I do feel like there were some decreases in her seizures, but it seemed like it was short-lived and, it sort of ebbed and flowed with our supply. The other thing is that I also began, after starting in 2015, I started advocating for whole plant medical cannabis program within the state, just because in my work in advocacy, I learned a lot more, I interacted with a lot of people from other states and a lot of parents from other states who had children who were similar to mine. And the majority of them said that they found the most success when they were able to add just a small amount of THC in addition to the CBD. And so, and the other thing is obviously from my experience in having, you know, gotten medication on the black market and not really knowing much about the sources that we were getting it from, I learned that, you know, every state is really an island in this, and that every state has to have their own supply, and that needs to be very tightly regulated. It needs to be controlled. It needs to be safe. It needs to be tested. It needs to be labeled. You know, and so the only way to do that is to do it within a state regulated program. So I started advocating for that in the very next year in 2015. And continue to do so for a while, but my daughter just really hit, she started going through puberty, in all honesty, and it's very common that seizure activity changes, especially in young girls who go through puberty. And she was really having a tough time, and she was really struggling, and so we started revisiting this idea of taking her out of state. And I found out that Maine had a reciprocity program, and that my little CBD letter would qualify her as a patient in the state of Maine. So I actually took her up there for part of the summer in 2016 so that we could have access to cannabis with THC added to her daily regimen, and under a doctor's care and continued monitoring, just because I didn't know what I was doing, and I wouldn't know like how to, you know, we were administering using oils, so I understood the administration, but as far as like the dosing and how much to give her and how often should we do increases, you know, I just really wanted to have that doctor's guidance on all of that, you know, because this is my child, and she's nonverbal, so she can't tell if she feels weird or if she's hungry. I mean, you kind of know. I mean, you know,
Yes.
you know your child, so you know her needs, but you know, she can't say, "Ooh, I feel funny," or you know what I'm saying. Like I didn't want her. The intention for a medical patient is not to be high, but to be well. So
let me ask you this: and in order for your daughter to get what she needs regular, it would be so much better if we had it here. If farmers are allowed to grow marijuana as a crop, tell us how it would benefit the state and the citizens in our communities.
Okay, sure. So, so this is, medical cannabis is not typically grown like out in big fields like a crop, like hemp is, or like corn or anything like that. It's got to be grown in a very controlled environment. So I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to see a commercial grow in Maryland, and it's grown indoors. They control the climate, they control the humidity, they force the plants to grow at a certain rate so that they have a continuous, and they rotate those crops from room to room so they can have different environments to force them into different growing cycles so that they have a constant supply of that plant, because that is medicine and they have to have a constant supply. So this would actually be a new industry that would come to our state. This is, you know, and I would hope that a lot of farmers would have an interest in being a part of this in South Carolina, but you're also going to see a lot of business people and entrepreneurs who are interested in bringing this new industry. This is a very technical field. The company that I visited, their lab where they manufacture and process all of the different products, they're all scientists. They're all scientists. These are highly educated. In fact, a lot of them were from South Carolina, Clemson, College of Charleston graduates. One of their scientists went to Auburn, which is my alma mater. So this is a very, very highly science-based type of industry. So I think it would be a great advantage to our state economically to bring this industry to our state. And there will also be a desire to have diversity as far as locations across the state, with the cultivation facilities, the processing facilities, and of course the dispensaries. You know, we want the dispensaries, you know, all over so patients have access. So I think it will be
Yeah.
a good opportunity for people within the community, and you know, and diversity is definitely a part of this, a very conscientious part of this
Right.
industry.
So, how much can a farmer uh, grow? Is there a limited that they would be able to grow?
So there's not a limit within the
Okay.
bill itself. Now, it's very possible that when DHEC starts writing those regulations as they are um, instructed to do within the piece of legislation, that there may be some sort of limit. Some states put limits on the size of the grows, and some states do not. So it's not anything that has already been specifically addressed in the bill, but obviously there is a supply and demand issue, right? And the bill does allow for 15 cultivation centers. So, you know, they're going to have to make the determination of how many plants they need to grow to provide enough medication for the number of patients. And obviously, to begin with, that number may be kind of small until more doctors are writing recommendations, until more patients are educated, until more doctors are educated. And then, you know, usually it takes a couple years, and then the programs tend to grow, exponentially over the first, 2 to 5 years.
There you go. Okay, so this next question, it's going to take it up to a whole nother level. Let's talk a little bit about scheduled drugs. The scheduled drugs refers preliminary to a drug's accepted medical use and the likelihood that a drug will cause a person to develop a substance use disorder. Drugs are also classified by the chemical makeup and the way they interact with the brain and the body. Do you think CBD oil should be classified as a Schedule 1 drug?
Well, CBD oil is already our Epidiolex is a commercial pharmaceutical CBD substance, and it's actually a Schedule 5 drug. CBD itself, the DEA just completely removed from the schedule, but remember, that's just one little component of the cannabis plant. So if you're talking about cannabis, marijuana as a whole, that is still a Schedule 1 controlled substance. And do I think it should be a Schedule 1 controlled substance? The answer is absolutely not. First of all, it clearly has medicinal benefits. We have 33 states that have legalized medical marijuana. There are well over 3 million patients, registered patients within the country using cannabis effectively to treat multiple different conditions. So, we've kind of gone beyond anecdotal evidence at this point. We're to the point where this is true human evidence, and you cannot turn a blind eye to it. And the science and research is there, even though you cannot really, there haven't really been the gold standard double-blind placebo clinical trials performed on cannabis due to its complex makeup and the rules that the FDA goes by and what they consider a drug and what they don't consider a drug. Marijuana just sort of doesn't fit into their program, if you will. But we know that there is scientific data that demonstrates why cannabis works within our body and how our bodies are made to accept cannabis and use cannabis as a healing plant medicine. Now, okay, and going back a little bit too, there's two parts to the scheduling. One is does it have a medicinal value? The other side is there the possibility of the substance to be abused? And I personally stand on the side that, cannabis is not for everyone. It is far less harmful to people than a lot of things that are legal now: tobacco, alcohol, caffeine, sugar. I mean, there's we could make quite a list. But I don't think that it's for everyone. And I personally think that it should be used under a doctor's care and monitoring. I feel like that's the best way to use it. Like I said, it's a relatively harmless substance, and the addiction rate is far, far less than a lot of other substances that are, sugar being one. So is there an opportunity for abuse or misuse? Sure. And you'd mentioned our youth. Obviously we're not going to encourage young children and young adults to use cannabis outside of a physician's care. But that's kind of, it gets into another issue. But yeah, so I mean, should it be scheduled? Maybe, but I mean, it certainly shouldn't be Schedule 1.
Yes. So, as far as the questions are concerned that have not entered the chat, are there anyone who would like to ask Miss Jill a question? She's being modest, and she's more in tune with it, more than just the fact that her daughter depends on this. This is a very close subject of hers. She goes to the State House to fight for this, and I'm learning more and more from her and Richard day and day. But tell me, are there any questions? If there are, we're going to open up the floor right quick for anyone to ask the question that of Miss Jill. Christian, open up the mic. Subject of hers. She goes to the State House to fight for this, and I'm learning more and more from her. Deborah, do you have a question? But tell me, are there any questions? If there are, I think she's listening to Facebook Live. Are there any questions, William?
Certainly. What sort of additional legislation would they need to make this more effective for more people? In
Good
South
question.
Carolina?
Right,
What's the next thing? What's the next thing they need the legislature to do?
Well, that's a great question, and it's actually a big piece of legislation, and I think that's part of why it's taken so long to get anything passed. Like I said, I've been working on comprehensive medical cannabis program legislation since 2015. So for 4 years, this is my 5th session on that. And what it will take is our government creating an entire program that will produce this product for patients. And so that's a heavy lift. That involves a lot of work on it would actually go to DHEC and be administered through DHEC. So it would take a lot of work on their part to create licensing criteria, and then to do the licensing, all of the protocols, like I said, all the safeguards, all the regulations, everything regarding packaging, labeling, testing. They do a broad spectrum of testing for all the cannabis products. That would have to be determined as far as what that would look like. And then there's a lot of work on on the part of the physicians. There's a requirement for physician education, CME, continuing education on medical cannabis. We are very fortunate that we have MUSC right here in Charleston, who has already committed to providing that CME. I've worked with them very closely. They now do an annual conference, 8-hour CME, and it's actually CLE accredited too, which is for attorneys, specific to medical cannabis. And especially if and when the bill passes, that will continue, and it will continue to grow. And they have been very gracious and I think very cutting edge and being ahead of this and being a part of it. So the education will need to be there. Obviously, the education for the patients. You know, think about the work that's been done to educate our communities throughout this state on COVID-19 and what safety protocols and measures have been put in place, and what, you know, the CDC is urging, you know, regarding social distancing, wearing masks, you know, washing your hands, and the work that has been done by our state government agencies to assure that that information is getting out to the general public. Well, this will be a similar type of thing. That education is going to have to go out to the general public. And we don't want patients to think, oh, it's legal, I can just go smoke pot now. That's not the case. That's not what this program will do.
Exactly.
And so the education is a huge component of this. And I have an advocacy organization, and our prime focus is cannabis education. So we will be, you know, on the ground. I mean, that will be our key focus once this bill passes, is to make sure that people are getting educated. When the CBD bill passed, I had this dad message me. He had a 3-year-old son, and he said, oh, it's legal. Can I get it now? Can I give it to my son? Because I work in food and bev, and I got this stuff all around me every day. And I'm like, no, that's not what you're going to give your child. So the education on this is going to be vital. So there are a lot of components, but from a legislative standpoint, what's going to be important going forward into, obviously we got cut short in 2020, right? Our session ended abruptly. But going forward into 2021, we will have to introduce a new bill, and it'll have to go through the committee process in both the House and the Senate. Hopefully, you know, in the 5 years of education that we've been doing, it's starting to sink into our lawmakers. And, you know, the other thing is electing folks in these new seats that that either have an interest, have an education, or you know, are interested in seeing help for patients in this state who are suffering. I mean, so
Right.
that's a big part of it. There's your little plug.
Before we
gotta get
ask
people in
another
office
question,
that are going to do this.
yes, before we even inject another question,
I can't hear you. Millicent.
I'm muted by the,
Oh,
okay,
there you are.
am I back?
Okay. Yes.
Perfect. Someone tried to take my plug away. So the answer to that question, I'm not even on the guest panel. Vote for Millicent. Because Millicent is the candidate that can help to push that law into effect. But before we go into that level, I want to also ask you this, and this came from off the script. How would one who is in medical need of medical marijuana, how would one get medical marijuana? We're in a state where this is not legal. So how do someone get it?
Well, first of all, let me say I never encourage anyone to do anything illegally. Okay. That said, I know that it's done, and I know, like I said, we went out of state, and we stayed out of state for our treatment for my daughter. But I do know patients who.
And your daughter is 8 years old.
She is now 12.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh.
So she was 8 when we went to Maine. She was 6 when we started this whole process. So if you can imagine, this is half of her life that I've been fighting for access to this medicine for her.
Oh my God.
It's time.
It's time. It's past time.
Yeah.
So my next question is, in what ways does it benefit farmers to farm this crop?
Well, obviously, like I said earlier, when we get into medical cannabis, it's very tightly controlled and regulated. But it is, it is a lucrative business. So if there are farmers that have an interest in being part of a team, I think there will be opportunities. There will be residency requirements within the bill for those who are the businesses that are going into this industry, because we feel like that's important. We understand and realize and acknowledge that a lot of the knowledge is coming from outside of the state because it's not legal here. So our farmers don't necessarily have experience in growing this crop. However, it is going to be very important that South Carolinians have the opportunity to be a part of this program, and that will be a significant part, I think, of the application process. So, for farmers who have an interest, I think there will be opportunities.
So, with that being said, are there any questions? Because there's so much that Ms. Jill is saying. I just want people to be able to get an understanding and a clarity. And one thing that she pointed out, and this is one thing that I say all the time, this is not designed so people can go around acting like Bob Marley, smoking big blunts all over the place. It's not designed for this. There's people with some serious medical issues. Children, older folks, young people. It doesn't matter of the age, creed, or color. One thing we do know, everybody feels pain the same identical way. Reverend Thomas Dixon, I see you are on our handle. Thank you for being here. Would you like to interject something to the group?
Unfortunately, first off, thank you for this forum, a very much needed forum, especially with my good friend Jill Swing. Good to see you again, Jill. So many people on here
Yeah, you too.
that I love so much because of your heart for activism, and so happy that you were able to find this mechanism to ease the pain that your daughter was in. It's amazing. But the fight that we've had moving forward is something I just don't understand. And that's why we definitely need people like Millicent in place. This was a part of my platform, not only last year for mayor, but also in 2016, because we definitely need to make available whatever it is that is going to ease the pain or the suffering of our fellow Americans. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the only people who are trying to prevent that right now are the people who have not figured out how they're going to profit off of it. So we just got to get them out of the way, because it's all about the good of the people, and move forward. So continue to fight. I stand with you, Jill, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Millicent, I stand with you in your bid for the state seat. And I stand with William and everything that William is doing, and so many others. Okay, so continue to fight the good fight. Unfortunately, I have to get off the line. I've got another situation I'm working on right now, and I'm expecting a call any minute. So keep up the good fight. I stand with you. Blessings to all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. This is Deborah. I have a question for Jill.
Mhm.
First of all, I'd like to know what the cost surrounding this is right now. And my second question is, if this is being regulated and it is legalized here in South Carolina, then I'm assuming that you would have to have a license to grow. And if you had that license to grow, how would Afro-American farmers fit in with that? Because sometimes they're left out of the equation when these type of things happen, because there's a lot of money to be made. And so I want to make sure that they're getting a fair shake, and also that our elderly Afro-American poor and Latino and Caucasian, that they have the opportunity to be able to get this drug and it's not priced outside of their realm simply because they're poor or undeserved or they don't have the funds to pay for it?
Okay, that is an outstanding question, Deborah. So thank you for that. So I think if I'm understanding your first part of the question, you're asking just the cost, maybe just of CBD, which is legal now.
Yes.
And in all honesty, it varies pretty broadly. Like I said, you can buy it at health food stores. Earth Fare, until they closed, sold it on their shelves. Some pharmacies carry it. And there are also CBD stores. So I think, like I said, it varies, but I would encourage people probably to go to either a CBD store or a health food store or a pharmacy where you can speak to an individual who is educated and can explain maybe some of the differences in some of the products, so you can make a determination as to what might be the best product with the right concentration or the right form of administration. So it does vary pretty widely. The CBD oil that I use for my daughter, I think runs anywhere from $150 to $200 a bottle. So it is not inexpensive, but it does last her about 3 or 4 months. And you can buy smaller bottles. So, it's just not as good of a value if it's something you're using every day. I'm sorry, I can't give you really a better, more concrete answer, but you just shop around. And like I said, just go to a reputable provider. It would be my recommendation. Now, when you get into medical cannabis and the licensing, you're correct. You will have to have a license. Like I said, there will be issued within the state 15 cultivation licenses, 30 processing licenses, and roughly about 75 dispensary licenses. And unless that changes, it hasn't changed in the last few years. I doubt that will change between now and when the new bill's introduced in January. There are some specific requirements or criteria as far as ranking applicants that are already written into the bill. There's a list of certain requirements, and like I said, residency will be an important factor. Diversity is also a criteria. Now, how they will rank those criteria, I'm not sure. Like I said, there's a whole list. Their ability to demonstrate that they are capable of handling this crop. There's integrity. There's all sorts of criteria. Like I said, geographical locations, because obviously we want geographical diversity as well. But I do think that there will be an effort to have diverse team members within these licenses. So an effort has been made within the wording of the bill to assure that happens. There is also a commission that will help DHEC create the ranking system and the licensing criteria, and also pick those licenses. And there is the requirement for, I've forgotten how the way it's worded, but there is the requirement for an African-American individual to be appointed to that committee, so that there is some diverse representation. That it's not a bunch of gray-haired old white guys picking their buddies. We don't want that. And then when you talk about the opportunity or the availability for patients who have financial hardships, or maybe can't afford the medication. A lot of patients are on disability and they have very limited financial resources. Right. So there is another part in the bill that within the ranking system for these licensees on how those entities are going to address and incorporate into their business plan support for patients who are less financially fortunate. So that will be another part of the criteria for getting a license is how do you plan on addressing, making sure that your product is affordable to those who, who may not have the financial means to otherwise have access.
Okay. Now we do have a question from Facebook, from the Facebook Live portion, and it's coming from Terry Lynn Durham. And her question is, what type of patients would be able to receive this legal marijuana?
Okay, so for better or for worse, there is a list. And the list, now, philosophically, just so I can go on record, I don't believe in the list. I believe in a doctor and his or her relationship with their patient. And I think that we shouldn't have 170 lawmakers in Columbia telling us who can and can't have medical cannabis or who may or may not benefit. They're not doctors, not one of them. Well, the one, and he just retired. So, I have an issue with that. That being said, like most states, there's a list. And the list is pretty comprehensive. I mean, the list was based on what other states are doing and on scientific data. So there are conditions like epilepsy, cancer, the way they handled chronic pain, because we got some pushback on chronic pain for whatever reason. It's for any condition for which an opioid is typically prescribed. So that opens it up to a lot of different conditions. PTSD is one, Crohn's disease. I mean, there's a whole list of conditions. And then there's also a condition or an opportunity for end of life. So if you have a terminal condition, which is determined by your physician that you will probably not live more than 12 months, that you will qualify, because I mean, honestly, that's just humane. I mean, that's the only humane thing to do. And a lot of hospice patients use cannabis to transition because it's they're able to be more alert and spend quality time, and they're more coherent at the end with their families versus morphine, which they typically use. So then in addition to that, there is a medical advisory board, and the medical advisory board is instructed to meet every 6 months and consider other conditions for which cannabis might be effectively utilized. And so if there is some sort of rare disease that didn't quite make the list, it's on there. Or they can, they can discuss it, they can do research, they can hear patient testimony, and then they can make a determination as to whether or not that condition should be added. And I like that because it is made up of physicians, it's made up of scientific researchers, it's made up of, I think we're gonna end up tweaking that in the wording a little bit, because I want to make sure that there's a pediatrician on there.
Oh, yes.
I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner, but that's a suggestion I'm going to make, because little people respond differently to medications than adult people do. And certainly, like I said, we don't want to open this up to, our youth who, unless they really need it, they shouldn't really be
Right.
Right.
So let me ask you this, Jill. The question that people want to know, this is also coming into the chat. What can we do as a community to get the bill passed?
That is a great question. Thank you, whoever asked that question. The most important thing you can do is to contact your lawmaker and encourage them to support the Compassionate Care Act or any other medical cannabis legislation that gets introduced. It seems to me that individuals, constituents reaching out to their lawmakers has a tremendous impact on whether or not they're willing to support. And a lot of them have said to me, well, I wasn't so sure, but then I started getting all these phone calls from constituents. saying that they want me to support this thing. So, and I'll tell you, the pushback in Columbia is hard, y'all. I mean,
Yeah.
law enforcement is all over this. They don't want this to happen because they think it's going to lead to full legalization, and then their ability for asset forfeiture is going to go away and they're going to lose money. And it's all about the money, y'all.
And that's my statement. It's all about the Benjamins.
Yeah, it's all about the money. And so these lawmakers have got to feel safe by supporting this, right? Because lawmakers are not always strong people, and the one thing they want is to get reelected. And
Right.
and if they're getting pushback from law enforcement, heavy pushback from law enforcement, and they're not getting the support from the folks back home, they're going to be like, "What? You know, I'd rather stay safe and support the law enforcement guys." So if you don't happen to know who your lawmakers are, if you go to the State House website, www.scstatehouse.gov, you can click on find your legislators, and just follow the prompt. You put your address in, and then it'll give you their name. And then you can go to members and get their contact information, or you can track them down on Facebook. I mean, you know, Twitter, you know, Instagram, whatever. There's all sorts of ways to track people down these days. But yeah, I mean, you know, reach out, and then, like I said, we got to get folks elected who are going to support this and who are solid on this issue and aren't going to give us some, you know, ambiguous, you know, run around. Yeah, that's something I might be willing to look into if I get elected. Okay, well, then I'll look into voting for you. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, I am so sorry.
I lost you again.
More that we could discuss relative to medical marijuana, and we have barely touched the surface. We could go on for hours dealing with this topic.
I could go on for hours.
State laws differ on the conditions that you can legally treat with the medical marijuana, but more than that, it allows those to use it if you have certain ailments like Alzheimer's, cancer, Crohn's disease, epilepsy, seizure, and the list goes on. And one thing I can say is that we cannot do this alone on the ground. It's going to take you voting in a person like myself. And you can reach out to me at middletonforyou.org. That's middletonforyou.org is my website. And you can go on my platform. We have social media of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And if we have to, we'll do this subject again, because there's so much that we had not even touched the surface. And as I stated at the beginning, this is a broad topic that needs more exploring. However, we cannot do that today. Please take the time to research medical marijuana for yourselves so that you can make an informed decision that will benefit your communities and your families. And thank you for tuning in today, because one thing I can tell you, I am the only candidate that I know that's having this as an open discussion and on my platform. I'm fighting for this because there are those that are closest to me medically that have the necessity needs of medical marijuana. I know people like Jill and her beautiful daughter who has the need for medical marijuana. So it's not just for grown-ups who just want to get high sociably. It is a herbal drug that will give less side effects than the opioids that is
Lost everybody.
infrastructure with Representative Marvin Pendarvis. We will be so excited for you to be here with us on next week as we talk about highway infrastructure. But if we got more time, we may have to do this again with Jill and Richard, so we can really.
We didn't even miss them.
I know. Don't tell him that. He's probably watching on Facebook right now. So my thing is, he lost out.
He wouldn't have gotten a word in edgewise, poor thing.
But Jill, again, please, we are so honored. You've really educated us today. And also on next week, Wednesday, we will have the great joy and the great honor of serving the Johns Island community by allowing, we will also be serving the community with the food distribution at the Head Start on Johns Island on Bohacket Road. So please tune in to our Facebook page, our website to get the information pertaining to the food drive that we will be distributing next week.
Oh,
All right.
And one thing, y'all, do recall that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Operation Dynamo will push back against the Trump Boat Parade with 3 days of events like the ones y'all.
Oh, something happened. Oh, we're running out of